The Arizona desert stretched endlessly before Tom Wheeler as he guided his weathered pickup truck down the dusty ranch road. At 62, his hands bore the scars of decades working the land-calloused palms that had mended countless fences, branded cattle, and buried too many dreams. The Wheeler Ranch had been in his family for 3 generations. But now it felt more like a monument to solitude than a home. The October sun cast long shadows across the red earth, and Tom could feel the familiar weight of loneliness settling on his shoulders like an old coat. Since Martha's passing 5 years ago, conversations had become rare luxuries, limited to brief exchanges with the grocery store clerk in town, or the occasional phone call from his estranged son in Phoenix. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that will touch your heart. Hit that bell icon to never miss an upload. As he approached the eastern boundary of his property, something unusual caught his attention. A melodic voice drifted across the desert, air clear, haunting, and completely unexpected. Tom stopped the truck and rolled down the window, straining to listen. The voice was singing in a language he didn't recognize, but the emotion transcended words. It spoke of longing, of connection to something greater than oneself. Following the sound, Tom walked toward an ancient cottonwood tree that marked the property line. There, beneath its sprawling branches, sat a young Apache woman, probably in her early 20s. Her long black hair caught the afternoon light as she sang, her eyes closed in concentration. She wore simple jeans and a turquoise blouse, her hands resting gently on the tree's gnarled bark. Tom stood transfixed, not wanting to interrupt this sacred moment. The woman's voice rose and fell, like the desert wind, carrying with it centuries of tradition and stories he could only imagine. When she finally opened her eyes and noticed him, she didn't startle or run. Instead, she offered a gentle smile. "I'm sorry," Tom said, removing his hat. "I didn't mean to intrude. I heard the singing and, well, it's been a long time since I've heard anything so beautiful out here." The young woman stood gracefully, brushing dust from her jeans. "You're not intruding. This tree has been listening to my family's songs for generations. My grandmother used to bring me here when I was little." She extended her hand. "I'm Sarah Crowfeather." "Tom Wheeler," he replied, shaking her hand and noting its surprising strength. "This is my land, though I reckon that tree's been here longer than any of us have been drawing breath." Sarah laughed, a sound as musical as her singing. "My grandmother always said the land doesn't belong to us, we belong to it. She taught me that trees are the keepers of memory, especially the old ones like this cottonwood." Tom found himself genuinely smiling for the first time in months. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She passed last spring, and I've been coming here to sing the songs she taught me. She said, as long as the songs continue, the connection between our people and this land remains strong." As they talked, Tom learned that Sarah worked as a nurse at the tribal health center and had recently moved back to the reservation after finishing her education in Tucson. She spoke passionately about her community, her work, and her grandmother's teachings about the importance of preserving Apache traditions. "This tree," Sarah said, placing her hand on the bark again. "My grandmother called it the singing tree. She said it holds the voices of all who have shared their stories beneath its branches." Tom felt something stir in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced since Martha's death. "Would you mind if I listened again sometime? I don't mean to impose, but your singing, it makes this desert feel less empty." Sarah studied his weathered face, seeing past the loneliness to the kindness beneath. "You're welcome anytime, Mr. Wheeler. The tree's big enough to share." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Tom walked back to his truck with a lightness in his step he'd forgotten was possible. That night, for the first time in years, he fell asleep to the memory of Sarah's voice carrying across the desert wind. The next morning, Tom found himself driving to the eastern boundary earlier than usual, hoping to catch another glimpse of the young Apache woman. But the area beneath the cottonwood was empty, save for the desert creatures going about their morning routines. He waited for nearly an hour before reluctantly returning to his ranch work. Days passed, and though Tom made several trips to the tree, he didn't see Sarah again. The silence felt heavier now, having been broken so beautifully. He began to wonder if he'd imagined the entire encounter, if loneliness had finally driven him to hallucinations. But then, on a Thursday evening, as he was checking the fence line, he heard it again, that same melodic voice rising from beneath the cottonwood. "Time." He approached more quietly, not wanting to interrupt. Sarah was there, singing what sounded like a different song, her voice weaving through the desert air like a prayer. When she finished, she looked up and smiled at him. I was hoping you'd come back, Mr. Wheeler. Please call me Tom. And I've been hoping to hear you sing again. It's changed something about this place for me. They began meeting regularly at the tree, sometimes talking, sometimes sitting in comfortable silence while Sarah sang. Tom learned about Apache traditions, about the importance of oral history, and about Sarah's dreams of opening a cultural center that would preserve and share her people's stories. Sarah, in turn, learned about Tom's life on the ranch, his late wife Martha, and the deep loneliness that had settled over him like dust. She saw how the land had shaped him, how his connection to it ran as deep as any Apache's, though expressed differently. My grandmother always said that the earth speaks to those who listen, Sarah told him one evening as they watched the sunset. She said some people hear it in the wind, others in the songs of birds, and some in the voices of those who came before. Tom nodded, understanding more than he could articulate. I think I'm starting to hear it again, thanks to you. Roots run deep 3 weeks into their friendship. Tom found himself looking forward to their meetings with an anticipation he hadn't felt in years. He started arriving at the cottonwood with small offerings, a thermos of coffee, wildflowers he'd picked along the way, or sometimes just stories about the ranch's history. Sarah appreciated these gestures, especially Tom's willingness to share his own connection to the land. She could see that, despite their different backgrounds, they both understood the profound bond between people and place. One afternoon, as autumn deepened and the cottonwood's leaves began to turn gold, Sarah didn't come to sing. Tom waited until well after sunset, worry gnawing at him. The next day brought the same absence, and by the third day, he was genuinely concerned. Gathering his courage, Tom drove to the tribal health center in town. The receptionist, a middle-aged Apache woman with kind eyes, looked up as he entered. Looking for Sarah Crowfeather, Tom said, hat in hand. I'm Tom Wheeler. We've been meeting at the old cottonwood on my property line, and I haven't seen her in a few days. I wanted to make sure she's all right. The receptionist's expression softened. Oh, you're the rancher, Sarah mentioned. I'm her aunt, Marie. Sarah's been working double shifts this week. We had 2 nurses call in sick, and she's been covering for them. She's exhausted, but she's been worried about missing your meetings. Relief flooded through Tom. Is there anything I can do to help? Marie studied him carefully, weighing her words. Sarah's been through a lot since her grandmother passed. She's been carrying the weight of preserving our family's traditions. And sometimes I think she forgets to take care of herself. Your friendship has meant more to her than you might realize. That evening, Tom drove to the cottonwood with a new understanding. When Sarah finally appeared the next day, she looked tired, but smiled brightly upon seeing him. I'm sorry, I've been absent, she said. Work has been. Your Aunt Marie told me. Tom interrupted gently. You don't need to apologize for taking care of people. That's who you are. Sarah's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back. Sometimes I feel like I'm trying to be everything to everyone. Nurse, culture keeper, granddaughter, carrying on traditions. It's overwhelming. Tom moved closer, his voice gentle. You know, Martha used to tell me that the strongest trees are the ones that bend with the wind, instead of trying to stand rigid against it. Maybe you don't have to carry everything alone. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the desert transition from day to night. Finally, Sarah spoke. My grandmother used to say that the ancestors send us helpers when we need them most. She said they don't always come in the form we expect. Tom felt a warmth spread through his chest. Maybe we're helping each other. Over the following weeks, their friendship deepened. Tom began bringing Sarah meals when he knew she was working long shifts, leaving them at the health center with notes of encouragement. Sarah, in turn, started teaching Tom basic Apache phrases and sharing stories about her grandmother's wisdom. One evening, as they sat beneath the cottonwood, Sarah sang a particularly beautiful song that seemed to make the very air shimmer. What does it mean? Tom asked when she finished. It's about finding your place in the world, Sarah explained. My grandmother taught it to me when I was struggling to decide whether to leave for college. She said that sometimes we have to journey far from home to understand what home truly means. Tom nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand. This ranch has been my whole world for so long, I'd forgotten there was anything else. But meeting you, hearing your songs, it's like I'm seeing it all with new eyes. Sarah smiled. And meeting you has reminded me that traditions aren't just about preserving the past, they're about building bridges to the future. As winter approached, Tom began to notice changes in himself. He started listening to music again, something he'd stopped doing after Martha's death. He found himself humming while he worked, and the ranch hands commented on his improved mood. You, seemed different lately, boss," said Carlos, his longtime foreman, one afternoon as they repaired a water trough. "More like the man you used to be." Tom considered this. "I suppose I am. I've been reminded that isolation isn't strength, it's just isolation." But beneath his growing contentment, Tom sensed something troubling Sarah. She'd grown quieter lately, her songs more melancholy. When he finally asked her about it, she hesitated before answering. "There's talk in the community about selling some of our land to developers," she said finally, "including the area around this tree. My grandmother's generation fought so hard to keep our land, and now we might lose it anyway, not to force, but to economic necessity." Tom felt anger rise in his chest. "What can be done?" Sarah shrugged helplessly. "The tribal council is exploring options. But the reality is that we need the money for infrastructure improvements, for the health center, for education programs. It's an impossible choice." That night, Tom lay awake thinking about Sarah's words. The idea of losing the cottonwood, of losing the place where their friendship had bloomed, was unbearable. But more than that, he understood now how much this land meant to Sarah's people, how it connected them to their ancestors and their future. By morning, an idea had taken root in his mind, an idea that would require courage, sacrifice, and a willingness to challenge everything he thought he knew about ownership and legacy. Seeds of change. The idea that had germinated in Tom's mind grew stronger with each passing day. He found himself studying property maps, researching land values, and having quiet conversations with his lawyer in town. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that he'd found a way to help Sarah and her community. But first, he needed to understand the full scope of the situation. At their next meeting beneath the cottonwood, Tom gently pressed Sarah for more details about the land sale. "It's complicated," Sarah explained, her voice heavy with worry. "The tribal council has been struggling financially for years. The casino hasn't generated the revenue they hoped for. And we desperately need funding for a new water treatment plant, road repairs, and expansion of the health center. The developers are offering top dollar for a section of land that includes this tree and several other culturally significant sites." Tom's jaw tightened. "And there's no other way to raise the money?" Sarah shook her head. "We've applied for federal grants, but the process is slow and uncertain. The developers want an answer within 6 weeks, and the council is feeling pressured to accept." That weekend, Tom drove to Phoenix to visit his son David, whom he hadn't seen in over a year. Their relationship had been strained since Martha's death, with David believing his father had retreated too far into isolation. "Dad, you look different," David said, as they sat in his suburban backyard, watching David's twin daughters play on their swing set. "Healthier, somehow." Tom smiled, thinking of Sarah's songs. "I've made a friend, an Apache woman named Sarah, who sings beneath the old cottonwood on the eastern boundary. She's reminded me that the land isn't just about ownership, it's about stewardship." David raised an eyebrow. "This sounds serious." "It is," Tom said. "I need to talk to you about something important. About the ranch. About what happens to it when I'm gone." Over the next hour, Tom explained his growing understanding of the land's significance to the Apache community, his friendship with Sarah, and the crisis facing the tribal council. He watched David's expression shift from skepticism to understanding. "So, what are you thinking, Dad?" David asked finally. Tom took a deep breath. "I'm thinking about donating a portion of the ranch to the tribal council, the section that includes the cottonwood and the areas around it. But I want to do more than that. I want to help them find a sustainable solution to their financial problems." David was quiet for a long moment. That's not what I expected you to say. But I can see how much this means to you." "It's not just about the land," Tom said. "It's about understanding that my connection to that place is part of something bigger. Sarah's people have been there far longer than my family has. Maybe it's time to acknowledge that." When Tom returned to the ranch, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. He called his lawyer and began the process of legally transferring a significant portion of his land to the tribal council. But he also had a larger plan in mind. The next time he met Sarah at the cottonwood, he could barely contain his excitement. "I have an idea," he said, "but I need to know more about your grandmother's dream for a cultural center." Sarah's eyes brightened. She always envisioned a place where Apache children could learn their traditional songs, where elders could share stories, where visitors could understand our connection to this land. She wanted it to be located somewhere meaningful, somewhere that held the voices of our ancestors. Tom smiled. "What if I told you that dream might be possible?" Over the next several evenings, Tom outlined his plan. He would donate 500 acres of his ranch to the tribal council, including the cottonwood and the surrounding area. But more than that, he would help them develop the land into a cultural center and ecotourism destination that could provide sustainable income for the community. The beauty of this land speaks for itself, Tom explained. People would come from all over to learn about Apache culture, to experience the desert, to understand the connection between people and place. It could provide jobs for your community and preserve your traditions at the same time. Sarah was speechless. When she finally found her voice, it was barely above a whisper. Tom, this is ... This is extraordinary. But I can't let you give up your family's land. I'm not giving it up, Tom said firmly. I'm making sure it continues to serve its purpose, connecting people to something greater than themselves. My family's legacy isn't just about owning land. It's about being good stewards of it. The following week, Tom arranged to meet with the tribal council. Sarah accompanied him, her nervous energy palpable as they entered the council chambers. Tom had prepared extensively for this presentation, but he knew that the success of his proposal would depend on the council's willingness to trust an outsider. Council Chairman Robert Crowdog, a dignified man in his 70s, listened intently as Tom outlined his proposal. Several council members asked pointed questions about Tom's motivations and the long-term implications of his offer. Mr. Wheeler, Chairman Crowdog said finally, what you're proposing is generous beyond measure. But I have to ask, what do you gain from this? Tom looked around the room, then at Sarah, who gave him an encouraging nod. I gain the knowledge that this land will continue to serve its true purpose. I gain the friendship of people who understand that the earth doesn't belong to us, we belong to it. And I gain the satisfaction of knowing that my family's legacy will be one of cooperation rather than separation. The council voted to accept Tom's proposal unanimously, with the understanding that the cultural center would be developed collaboratively, respecting both Apache traditions and the land's natural beauty. As they left the meeting, Sarah turned to Tom with tears in her eyes. My grandmother always said that the ancestors send us what we need when we need it. I think she sent me you. Tom felt his own eyes moisten. Maybe she did. Or maybe she sent us to each other. The singing tried 6 months later. The transformation of the land was remarkable. The cultural center was taking shape, with traditional Apache architecture harmonizing beautifully with the desert landscape. Sarah had been hired as the center's director, and she threw herself into the work with passion and dedication. Tom had kept a modest portion of his original ranch, enough to maintain his cattle operation and provide for his simple needs. But most days, he could be found at the cultural center, working alongside Apache craftsmen and sharing his knowledge of the land's history from a rancher's perspective. The cottonwood tree had become the centerpiece of the center's main gathering area. A circular seating area had been built around it, designed to accommodate both traditional Apache gatherings and educational programs for visitors. Sarah sang there regularly now, her voice carrying across the desert to reach not just Tom, but dozens of others who came to learn and experience. One afternoon, as Tom watched Sarah lead a group of Apache children in a traditional song, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. The loneliness that had defined his existence for so long had been replaced by a sense of community and purpose he'd never imagined possible. She's remarkable, isn't she? Said a voice beside him. Tom turned to find Dr. James Crowfeather, Sarah's father, who had driven up from Tucson for the day's activities. She is, Tom agreed. Your daughter has changed my life in ways I'm still trying to understand. Dr. Crowfeather, a professor of indigenous studies at the University of Arizona, smiled knowingly. Sarah has always had a gift for building bridges between worlds. Her grandmother saw it in her from a young age. As the children's song ended, Sarah approached them, her face glowing with happiness. Tom, I wanted you to meet my father properly. Dad, this is Tom Wheeler, the man I've told you so much about. Dr. Crowfeather extended his hand warmly. I've heard about your generosity, Mr. Wheeler. What you've done for our community goes far beyond charities, a recognition of shared humanity. Tom shook the offered hand, feeling the weight of acceptance and respect. I've learned more from your daughter about the meaning of stewardship than I learned in 60 years of ranching. That evening, as the day's visitors departed and the desert settled into its familiar twilight quiet, Tom and Sarah found themselves alone beneath the cottonwood once more. The tree had grown slightly during the months of construction, its branches reaching a bit higher toward the desert sky. Sing something, Tom requested, settling onto one of the benches that now surrounded the tree. Sarah smiled and began a song he'd never heard. before a new composition that seemed to weave together. Apache tradition was something entirely fresh. Her voice rose and fell with the desert wind, carrying notes of gratitude, hope, and deep connection to the land. When she finished, Tom was quiet for a long moment. That was beautiful. Different from your grandmother's songs, but beautiful. It's a song about friendship, Sarah explained. About how understanding can grow between people who come from different places. I wrote it for you, Tom. For us. Tom felt tears prick his eyes. For us. For what we've built together. My grandmother always said that the most important songs are the ones that tell the story of how people come together to create something greater than themselves. As if summoned by her words, other figures began to emerge from the gathering darkness: tribal members, ranch hands, visitors who had extended their stay, and even David, who had driven up from Phoenix with his family to see the cultural center. I thought you might want to hear the first public performance of Sarah's new song, David said, approaching with his daughters in tow. These two have been asking about their grandfather's singing tree. Tom's granddaughters, now 10 years old, looked up at the cottonwood with wide eyes. Is this really a singing tree, Grandpa? One of them asked. It is, Tom replied, lifting her onto his lap. But it only sings when people come together and share their stories. Sarah began her song again, and this time other voices joined in, some humming along, others adding harmonies, and a few elders contributing traditional Apache vocals that complemented Sarah's melody perfectly. The children clapped along, and Tom found himself humming, his weathered voice blending with the others beneath the spreading branches. As the song reached its crescendo, Tom realized that the tree truly was singing, not just through Sarah's voice, but through the voices of everyone who had gathered beneath it. The cottonwood had become what Sarah's grandmother had always known it could be, a living symbol of connection, tradition, and hope. When the song ended, the group remained in comfortable silence, each person lost in their own thoughts about the evening's beauty. Finally, Chairman Crow Dog, who had arrived quietly during the performance, spoke. This is what our elders meant when they talked about the singing tree, he said. It's not just the tree that sings, it's the voices of all who gather beneath it, sharing their stories and their songs. Tom nodded, understanding fully for the first time. And those voices become part of the tree's memory, don't they? They do, Sarah confirmed. My grandmother always said that every song sung beneath this tree becomes part of its story. And now your story is part of that too, Tom. As the group began to disperse, people making their way back to their cars and homes, Tom remained seated beneath the cottonwood. Sarah sat beside him, both of them comfortable in the desert silence. What are you thinking? Sarah asked finally. Tom smiled, looking up at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I'm thinking about how lonely I was before I heard you singing, and how different everything is now. Do you miss it? The quiet, the solitude. Tom considered this carefully. I miss the simplicity sometimes, but I wouldn't trade this for anything. This sense of being part of something bigger, of having a purpose beyond just maintaining what came before. Sarah leaned back against the tree's trunk. My grandmother used to say that the greatest gift we can give to the world is to become who we were meant to be. I think you're becoming that person, Tom. I think we both are, Tom replied. Together, as they sat in comfortable silence, a gentle breeze moved through the cottonwood's branches, creating a soft rustling sound that seemed almost like music. Tom closed his eyes and listened, hearing in that natural symphony the voices of all who had gathered there, past, present, and future, creating an endless song of connection and community. The singing tree had found its voice again, and Tom Wheeler, the lonely rancher who had stumbled upon an Apache girl's song, had found his place in the world, not as an owner of the land, but as a steward of the connections that make us human. When Sarah finally began to sing again, her voice soft, in the desert night, Tom joined her, his rough rancher's voice, blending with her trained melody to create something entirely new, something that honored both their traditions, while pointing toward a future built on understanding, respect, and shared hope. The tree listened, as it always had, adding their voices to its ancient memory, and preparing to share their story with all who would come after. Thank you for watching this incredible story of friendship, tradition, and the power of human connection. If this tale touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to discover more amazing true stories. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the magic that happens when different worlds come together. Until next time, keep listening for the songs that connect us all.